Hello there, I hope you're doing well. My name is Ruben and I'm a mathematics teacher. I want to give you a warm welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to see how we can add and subtract whole numbers. How are we going to do this video? First of all, we'll start by reviewing the concept of integers, and then we'll proceed to solve additions and subtractions of integers using practical rules. We'll explore how to add and subtract numbers with the same sign, as well as how to handle additions and subtractions involving integers with different signs. Everything will be explained step by step.
With all of that said, let's finally begin.
Alright. Let's start with this video. The first thing we need to remember is that the set of integers, which we denote with the letter Z, is made up of all positive numbers, meaning from 1 to positive infinity, and all negative numbers, meaning from -1 to negative infinity. And they have a number that acts as the boundary separating them, which is 0. It's neither positive nor negative, it's neutral. Now another thing we need to remember is how to identify a positive or negative number. That will depend on the sign placed in front of the number. For example, in this case, it's a negative number. Why? Because it has the negative sign, you understand, right? For example, the number +7, this is a positive number. Now, what we need to keep in mind is that if I have any given number, let's take 5 for instance, and there isn't any sign placed directly in front of that number, it automatically signifies that it is positive. We don't write the sign, but we must understand that it is indeed positive. Alright then, now that we have thoroughly reviewed all of this, what we're going to do is to see how we can add and subtract whole numbers using the practical rule. Let's take a look at what that's all about. We are going to divide this practical rule into two distinct ways. The first applies when you have two integers with the same sign, and the second applies when you have two integers that have different signs. We will now examine how each of these specific cases is solved. Let's begin with the rules for addition and subtraction involving two numbers that have the same sign. Let's recall what we discussed today. When there is nothing in front, we said it's positive, therefore I have a positive number and then another positive number. So what do we have to do in this case when both numbers have the same sign? Let's add these numbers, that is, I'm going to do 2 plus 5, which is 7. And what sign will I put? I'm going to assign the sign that these numbers have at the set, which is a positive. Now, if I want to check this using the number line, we need to remember the following. If I'm going to add on the number line, I'm going to move it towards the right. And if I'm subtracting on the number line, I'll always move to the left. So let's go with the example we just did. I'll start at +2, meaning I'll be standing right here. From here, what will I do? I'm going to add 5. I'm going to move to the right. How many units? 5. Now 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Here I've added 5 units. What number did I end up on the number line? On the number 7. Is it the same as the one we calculated with the practical rule? Yes, that's right. Now let's see what happens when they are negative. Well, in the second example, if we observe, notice that we have a -3 and a -2. Since they are of the same sign, I am going to do exactly the same thing. What am I going to do? I'm going to add the values. 3 plus 2.
3 plus 2, how much is that? The answer is 5, so that's what my numerical value will be.
And then I will proceed to evaluate the sign. Since both of them share the same sign, I will continue to respect that sign. This means that the final value will ultimately be -5. Now, we're going to check on the number line if this is correct. Alright, I'm going to place myself at the first number, which is -3. I am currently located here. And now, I will subtract 2. Since I need to subtract 2 full units from it, I have to move my position over to the left. 1 step and then 2 steps. Here I have successfully subtracted 2 units. Where did I find myself positioned on the number line? At -5. Does it match? Yes, perfect. Let's now consider what happens when they are of different signs. So, how exactly should we proceed? Before we look at how to solve an addition or subtraction of integers with different signs, I'd like to tell you that if this video is helping you, please give it a like. It costs you nothing and helps me a lot. Also, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the channel where we'll be covering all the math topics taught in middle school education. Also, I'd like to say that if you'd like to donate to this educational project, in the video description, you'll find the corresponding links. Any donation you'd like to make is of tremendous help, no matter how small, to continue creating free educational videos. Alright then, let's proceed with the second part of this video presentation. Now, let's take a look at the following. I have a negative number and I also have a positive number. What does the practical rule tell us? It states that if I need to add or subtract whole numbers that have different signs, I will calculate the difference between those numbers completely disregarding their signs. In other words, I'm going to perform 6 minus 3. This leaves us with a result of 3. Therefore, that is the final numerical value. And now, we're going to say what sign we'll put on it. What we're going to do is observe which number is larger, look, without taking the sign into account. I have 6 and 3. Which is greater, the 6 or the 3? It's the 6. Therefore, what I'm going to do, I'm going to look at the sign that's in front of that number, the one that's larger. In this case, it's the negative sign, so that will be the sign of the final result. Now, let's do this on the number line to see if it matches what we just did. Alright, we're going to place ourselves at negative 6 on the number line. We are currently standing right here. So what exactly do we do now? We are adding the number 3 because we need to add, we are moving towards the right. A total of 3 units, which means specifically 1, then 2, and finally 3. And to this amount, I then added 3 more.
Where did I end up on the number line? At negative 3. Does that match? Yes. Now let's take a look at the following example.
Well, in the next example, we have to remember what we discussed today. Since it doesn't have any sign in front of it, it's positive. So, what I have here is a positive whole number combined with a negative whole number. What am I going to do in this situation? I'm going to perform the subtraction of these two numbers. 8 minus 2, that gives me 6. So, I already know that the numerical value is 6. I have the number 8 and I also have the number 2. Between these two, which one is the larger number? It's 8. Therefore, I check what sign it has, and it is positive, which means that the final result will be positive, a positive 6. Let's see if it checks out on the number line. I'll start at 8, which is the first number. And what am I going to do now? I'm going to subtract 2 units. Since I'm going to subtract, I'll move to the left. 1 and 2 units. I subtracted 2 here. What number was marked on the number line? The number 6. Did it match? Yes. Alright then, let's proceed with our very last example. As we've already mentioned here today, if there is no sign placed directly in front of a number, it automatically signifies that it is positive. Since I currently have both a positive number and a negative number, I am going to subtract these two numbers from each other. It's 6 minus 1. This leaves me with 5. I already know that the numerical value of this calculation is 5. Now I'm going to evaluate the sign. The 6 is greater, meaning that the final result will be negative. Why is that? Because it is the sign that the larger number has, that is to say, it will be negative. Now, let's take a look at the number line. I'm gonna stand right on the number 1, which is my first number. And what am I going to do next? I'm gonna move to the left because we are subtracting 6 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Here, I subtracted 6 units. What value did I end up with? Negative 5. In conclusion, if I have two whole numbers that are either being added or subtracted, but they both have the same sign, I'm going to add them together and then I'm going to place the sign of the numbers that are in the problem. Now, if you're going to add or subtract integers that have different signs, what you always need to do is perform the subtraction. And the sign of the final result will be the sign of the number that is larger of the two. If the video helped you, I'll ask you again, please, to like it. I invite you again to subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to make a donation, I remind you, in the video description, you'll find the relevant links. See you in future videos. Best regards.